All right, welcome back. We've reached it. The final incredible chapter of Genesis. This is Genesis 50. It's the grand finale to Joseph's entire story. This epic journey of betrayal, suffering, and then this unbelievable restoration. And right here in this last chapter, we get one of the most powerful perspective-shifting statements of faith in the entire Bible. Seriously, it changes everything. Let's dive in.
So picture this. The big funeral is over. Jacob, the patriarch, has been laid to rest. And for Joseph's brothers, well, you can just feel the tension. There's this one terrifying question that's just hanging in the air. Okay, Dad's gone now. What's to stop Joseph from finally getting his revenge for what we did to him? And that fear, that single thought, is what really drives this whole chapter. Okay, so Act 1, a father's final journey. Before we even get to that big confrontation, we really have to grasp the sheer scale of Jacob's funeral. I mean, this was not just some family gathering. This was a state event in Egypt. And the chapter opens with this just incredibly personal moment. Joseph falls on his father's face, weeping, kissing him. I mean, think about it. This is the second most powerful man in the entire known world. And right here, he's just a son grieving his dad. All the power, all the status, it just melts away. And what you see is the raw human emotion of love and loss. It's such a powerful way to begin. And get a load of this timeline. The Egyptians mourned for Jacob for 70 days. This wasn't just them being polite. That's the exact same amount of time they would mourn for one of their own pharaohs. That is the highest honor Egypt could possibly give, and it was all because of the incredible respect they had for Joseph. And just look at who went. It wasn't just Joseph and his brothers. Pharaoh sent his own servants, the elders of his palace, the elders of the entire land of Egypt, and he sends chariots and horsemen, basically an honor guard. This was a full-blown state funeral. It was this massive public display of just how much Pharaoh valued Joseph. So, Act 2, an old fear returns. Because as soon as they get back to Egypt, all that ceremony, it's over. And that's when the old guilt, the old fear, just comes roaring back for the brothers. Now that their father is gone, they feel totally and completely exposed. And this really shows you their panicked mindset. On the one hand, you have their fear. They're thinking, Joseph is probably going to hate us now. He's definitely going to pay us back for all the evil we did to him. They're just projecting their own guilt onto him. And so on the other side, you see their plea. It's almost strategic. They beg him, please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. They're pulling out all the stops, trying to find any angle that might just save their skin. And then they actually go to him. They fall down on their faces in front of him, and they say this, behold, we are your servants. Wow. Just think about that for a second. Decades ago, they hated him. They sold him into slavery because he had these dreams of them bowing down to him. And now here they are, completely driven by fear, fulfilling that very prophecy in the most humbling way imaginable. All right, Act 3, the divine reframe. So the brothers they're braced for impact. They're expecting the worst, they've made their desperate plea, and what Joseph does next, it changes everything. It's not about revenge at all. It's about perspective. It's this incredible divine reframe of the entire story. And the very first thing Joseph does, he weeps. And you have to ask why. It's not anger. He's weeping because he sees that they're still trapped. They're still living in fear. They totally miss the point of his forgiveness. And even more than that, they just don't get the sheer scope of God's plan. Those are tears of pure compassion. And then he asks them this question, and it is the absolute pivot point of the whole conversation. He says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? And what he's saying here is so crucial. He's saying, look, vengeance, judgment, that's not my job. That belongs to God and God alone. He's completely taking himself out of the role of judge and jury. And then he says it. He delivers what is without a doubt one of the most profound statements in the entire Bible. He looks at these men, his brothers, who sold him into slavery, and he says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That right there, that is the theological Super Bowl of the entire book of Genesis. So what Joseph is talking about here, this is a huge concept we call divine providence.
It's this core belief that God is so completely sovereign, so in control of everything, that he can take the absolute worst things people do, the most hateful, evil intentions, and he can weave them into his perfect, good, and redemptive plan. And it's important to remember, this doesn't excuse the evil, not at all, but it shows that God's plan is bigger than our sin. Joseph's life is maybe the clearest illustration of this truth in all of Scripture.
And what was that good that God intended? Joseph lays it out for them, plain and simple. He says God used their terrible act to get him to Egypt, to put him in a position of power, all for one reason, to save many people alive. He shows them the actual, tangible results of God's sovereign plan. He's basically saying, you are alive today because of what God did through your evil. Okay, Act 4, a promise for the future. So the family is reconciled. It's this beautiful moment. But that's not where the book of Genesis ends. It ends with Joseph, now a very old man, looking to the future with just this incredible, forward-looking faith. Joseph lives to be 110 years old. Think about that. He gets to see his children, his grandchildren, even his great-grandchildren. He lives this incredibly long, full life, and he gets to witness with his own eyes the very beginning of God's promise to Abraham taking root to make his family into a great nation. So, on his deathbed, he pulls his sons close and gives them this final command. It's a three-parter. First, he makes them swear an oath. He says, swear to me. Second, he gives them a prophecy, a promise. God will surely visit you. He's telling them God hasn't forgotten them. And third, he gives the command that comes from that promise. And you shall carry up my bones from here. Don't leave me in Egypt. And this is so important. Joseph's bones, his coffin sitting there in Egypt, it wasn't supposed to be a tombstone. It was a signpost. For the next 400 years, it was going to be this physical, tangible reminder for all the Israelites that Egypt, this is not your home. It was like a silent sermon, constantly preaching that God's promises are true and that a better home, the promised land, was still to come. And that's how the book of Genesis ends. Not really with an ending, but with a promise, pointing to the future. Joseph's life shows us that real forgiveness is possible. It shows us that God is sovereign over absolutely everything. And it shows us that true faith is always looking forward to what God has promised to do. So that really leaves us with this one last thought, doesn't it? How does faith in a divine plan, a faith that God can bring good even from the most painful evil, how does that change our story?